down south in the land of cotton. Good times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. I wish I were in Dixie. Hooray, hooray. No, I don't. Still getting a few things ready, Cubs, so give me a moment. Where the hell did my pencil go? Writing utensils, why do you abandon me? Okay. When I was a boy on a ranch, I had a lot of dressing to do. Oh, dang. I'm sure that didn't sound too pleasant. We have to adjust my audio settings once again. Headphone and headphone. No, I want this to go back to mic array. Mic array. Hooray, hooray. I had to put the apostrophe in redneck because otherwise Torture said it was naughty. I'm kind of listening on her right now. Oh. Okay, let's get over to the just chatting screen. Hey, there you go. Cool. So I don't know if I want to use the good old 2D version. Well, hold on. Okay. Yada yada. Nope. Okay. Hello. Oh, hold on. That one. Yeah. Oh, why am I on here twice? Don't need you on there. Get off there. Okay. All by myself. Don't want to be all by myself anymore. Okay. Get back out of this. Yo, what's this? What is this? Oh. Payout thing doesn't matter because I'm not paid. Okay. Let's see. Ah, there I am. Cool. I have up to 113 followers. That's kind of cool. So, yeah. I need to rename this one. This is Storyteller PNG. And this one is Storyteller. Rename. Live 2D. Cool. So I've got 2 different Storyteller streams now. Kind of cool, ain't it? I mean, I could show you because I've got good old standby, which is this one. See, this one's cool. I like this one. This is Storyteller Classic. Then I've got this one, which has me with the desk, and I still haven't done the background yet. Damn it! Oh, wait a minute. Why is it not responding? Damn it! Why does my model never cooperate? I just have too much shit running on my computer right now, which is, always an infinite possibility. Let's close a few things. Okay, I don't need the Bethesda window open. Don't guess I need Slides window open. Don't need Beano's window open. Nope. And unless it opened. Okay. Cable's not up, so he's not doing anything. Did that give me anything better? No? Oh, wait. Responses. Cool. Oh, I have not upgraded the desk. Single werewolves in my area. Click here to find out. What? Single werewolves in my area? I know they hang out at the zoo, apparently. Oh, that's right, good. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Of course, losing my tracking again. I guess I need to shut that because I don't need that open. My Twitter pop up? Did it tweet that I'm on? I'm just saying I'm doing redneck literature. No, just a basic one. Okay. I'm doing your share. Damn. So many coughs. So little time. So many times. So little coughs. Oh, not at. I need the tuba. Oh. Make it E and the tuber. Because I do Spreckens Anglais. And the tuber. Surprising, I guess. Okay. Copy that. Post it. No more notifications. Okay. Close that. Switch over to the most discordant of things. Put it over to streamer linkings. Paste it. Because if I don't paste it, no one will come. Which more public would say this is indeed live because I post it and oh, wrong one. Okay, don't want to put on Spot Master. Agent. At least I caught myself this time. Paste it there. Switch over to Lubino. To the self promo. There we go. Paste it there. Doobie doo. Then go up to the bear. promo. Pasty. Paste it, damn it. Thank you. Let's see, should have popped up live on Twitch. Yep, okay, I'm on there. Cool. Cool. And then take a quick peek. Looks like all my bots are up. Maybe they'll actually cooperate today. I want to. How do you do a poll? I've never done a poll this way. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Damn it. The chat open. Tools. Damn it. I really don't know how to do a poll in here. Do mod view. I don't think I've ever done mod view on my stream. Mod actions. No. Predictions. Ban requests. Suspicious. Reward. No rewards. Active mods. If you go back. Ban requests. Record keys. Cody feed. Active mods. What the hell? Channel tools. Did not want to collapse that. Sleep messages. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. That's no. Session, yeah, no. Live. No, that's where it was. Creator dashboard. That's not what I wanted. No, screw it. Someday I'll know what the hell I'm doing, but today is not that day. Someday I'll have mods that aren't just bots. Unlikely. But we're at the 15-minute mark, so I should probably consider reading pretty soon. But I want to know, do you want this one? 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 Number one. Number two. Number one. Number two. Who does number two for? If it's going to blink every time I have to reload on this one. Nah, I'm going to go and keep it old school. I mean, I like this way. I haven't finished the background and everything else. I have the audio on both of them, I think. maybe. I don't know if you can hear the background music or not. I literally just copied between the two of them, and I have this one. I don't know. Which one do you want to keep? That's why I would love to make a poll. I guess I'll just screen cap them both later and ask on the Twitter later. I guess I'll just stick to old school for now then. Which doesn't matter where I'm holding the book because you won't be able to see it anyway. Well, first, I'm gonna try to catch a bun. That's a bun. I gotta eat buns. Okay, catch. Great. Follow. And I want to catch the bun. Okay. Because the buns be tasty, yo. Okay. The first story we have for tonight is When I Was a Boy on the Ranch by J. Frank Dobie. D-O-B-I-E. Dobie. There were 6 of us children, and our ranch was down by the brush country of Texas between Nueces River and Rio Grande. The automobiles have outrun the horses since then. Radios have drowned out many a cricket's voice, and many a coyote's wail and cry. And many a ranch yard, the lights of the Doco plants have dimmed to the glowing points of the fireflies, the lightning bugs, we called them. But the ranch of our childhood is still a ranch. And south of it, clear to the Mexican border, northwest of it to the Rocky Mountains, and on up beyond the line where Montana joins Canada, there are millions and millions of acres of other ranches on which boys and girls live. Despite automobiles, these boys and girls still ride horses. Despite radios, they will still listen in the evening for crickets and frogs, and sometimes in the night to the wailing cries of coyotes. As for electric lights on the ranches, they light such small places that the fireflies in the grass and the stars in the sky never notice them. The country is still country. For all the changes brought by invention, ranches are still ranches. Did not catch my Bumble-Bee. I am upset. So if I tell how we children lived on our ranch, I'll also be telling how children still live on other ranches, scattered all over the western half of the United States. We liked ranching so much that our best game used to be playing ranch. There were fine live oak trees between the yard fence and the pens about the stables and barns, and it was in the shade of these trees, especially during the summer, that we built our ranches. To build a pasture, we drove little stakes close together in the ground until a plot about as big as a kitchenette was enclosed. Sometimes a pasture was made by setting up posts of stakes in the ground and then stretching cords, an imitation of barbed wire, from one corner of the pasture to the other. Each ranch had several pastures, and of course, each ranch had headquarters where horses and corrals were built. The houses were generally of boards, corrals were pickets laid between pairs of upright posts. Fencing in the pastures was never so much fun as getting them stocked. It took work to fence in the land and improve it with dirt tanks, which never would hold water for very long. It took patience to construct corral gates that would open and shut, and to make a house that would not fall down upon a turn when a turkey stepped on it or a pup ran against it. But stocking this land with cattle and horses and goats was nothing but fun. We had two kinds of cattle, high grade cattle and common stuff. The horn tips of real cattle, which were clipped off for branding sometimes because are purebred animals. Sometimes we had hundreds of them. Our common Mexican cattle were represented by oak walls. But we prized our horses far more than our cattle. Horses consisted of sewn thread spools. Most of our clothes were made on the ranch, and those clothes took an astonishing amount of thread. Moreover, when we went visiting, we had our eyes open to discarded spools, but visits of other kind were rare, and those that brought spools were rarer. A spool was alongside and can be branded as it was along back. That can be saddled. I can't think of any better kind of play horse than a spool. The ranches in our part of the country were herds of white Mexican goats. White-shelled snails were abundant in our neighborhood, and these shells became our goats. The live snail would not stay in a pasture, for he can climb straight up and carry his shell with him. So our goats were always empty shells. There were no sheep in the country. We had never heard anything particularly connected with sheepmen. And so we had no sheep, just cattle, horses, and goats. Each of us had a brand. Mine was NEB, which an uncle of mine named Neville used. Fanny's was a crossed heart. Eldridge's was an E with an E on a bar. Lee's brand was an L on a bar. The two young children were too small to build ranches and brand herds by themselves. Consequently, if Henry or Martha got into the game, they got in as hired help. Our branding irons were short pieces of balum wire with a hook on one end. This kind of branding iron was called a running iron. When we had occasion to brand, we built a fire close to the ranch headquarters, heated up the running irons, and burned our brand onto the spool horses, the common oak ball cattle, and the fine horn cattle. Like real ranchmen, we bought and sold stock. When we made a trade, cattle or horses, we seldom traded goats. Had to be gathered up, driven to the shipping pens, loaded on the railroad cars, transported, and delivered. Then, after they were delivered, they had to be branded with the brand of the new owner. A great many of the common cattle were decayed on the inside, and when they were branded, collapsed into nothing. We had to sell cheap for the very simple reason the dollars were scarce and the cattle were plentiful. The dollars we had, however, were extraordinarily good dollars of sound coinage and pure metal. The ranch kitchen used a considerable amount of canned goods, particularly canned tomatoes, salmon, and sardines, along with some peaches and corn. We held Old Stray, Dandy, and Baldy were the horses on our ranch that could be trusted with the youngest children. Oh, did I miss a page? Yeah, I missed a page. Sorry about that. Okay. So we held the empty can with a fire with tongs until the solder started to run, and then caught the solder in an old spoon, pouring it onto a round wooden box that had once held bluing. The diameter of this round bluing box was, and still is, about that of a silver dollar. The dollars were sometimes thicker than a silver dollar, and they were always heavier, but buying cattle, they were worth just as much. We had another source of metal for our dollars. In the fall of the year, hunters would be on our ranch, either camped out or staying with us on the house. They usually shot up a many boxes of shells practicing on trees. After the shooting was over, the children gouged out the lead bullets lodged in the trees and melted them into dollars. I spoke of shipping cattle. The train was a string of empty sardine cans coupled up to another with wire and hooks. Motive power was the chief problem. We tried hitching horned frogs and green lizards to it, but neither pulled with any strength. A horned frog would sometimes pull an empty wagon made of cardboard matchbox. Old Joe, the best dog we ever had, will pull a train pretty well if he went in a straight line. But when he didn't, he caused several bad wrecks and overturned cars and spilled cattle out. If delivery of cattle had to be made promptly, the simplest and surest way to make the engine pull the train was to tie a string up to it and pull it yourself. Of course, there were real horses and real cattle to interest us. Children brought up on a ranch usually learn to ride only a little later than they learn how to walk. True enough. Old Stray, Dandy, and Baldy were the horses on our ranch that could be trusted with the youngest children. Old Stray was a common Mexican pony that some Mexican had ridden down and turned loose on our ranch. When we first saw him, he was as thin as a stick horse. Nobody claimed him, so after a while we used him. He seemed to appreciate having plenty of grass to eat, but he had no intention of ever exerting himself again. In short, he was not only gentle, but pokey. If a child fell off him, he would stop, graze until the child got back up again. Baldy was an enormous horse, and by the time a boy was big enough to scramble upon his back without help from a man or a friendly fence, that boy was nearly ready for long pants. The Dandy was a black horse of thoroughbred trotting stock. He alone of all the horses was entitled to corn the year round. And the other horses lived mostly on grass. We rode Dandy sometimes as well as drove him, but he had too much life in him for mere beginners. He was as kind and as intelligent as he was lively. One time, when my brother Elrich was very small, he toddled into Dandy's stall while Dandy was eating. The flies were bothering Dandy, and he was swishing his tail and stamping his feet. He knew the little boy was in danger. He put a hind foot against the child and shoved him out of the stall. He did not kick him, he just shoved him. By the time I was 8 years old, I had several horses to ride. There was Maudie, a little Spanish mare, that would kick up when I punched her in the shoulder with my finger and pointed my hand down towards her flank or tail. Later, there was Buck, a horse raised on the ranch. He was a bay with a white face and stocking feet. I kept him long as he lived, and he died on the ranch where he was born. He could be turned loose on camp and would not stray off. Once I was running to head some wild steers, and Buck gave me a quick dodge. The saddle, which was loosely girded, turned, throwing me to the ground and nearly breaking my hip. Buck could turn on a dime and stop as quickly as one could snap a finger. On this occasion, he stopped so suddenly that he did not drag me a foot, though I was still in the saddle, even with my hips stuck on the ground. He was the best cow horse I ever rode. Even when we were alone, I talked to him. By the time I was 12 years old and a regular ranch hand, I was sometimes on him from daylight until long after dark. More than once I went to sleep riding him. I loved him. He loved me. I think of Buck oftener now and then. I think of people who have been my friends. As ranch cows do not give much milk as dairy cows, we usually had a pen full of them to milk, especially in the summertime. Each cow had her calf, and the calves were allowed part of the milk. The Mexican man usually did the milking, but it was a privilege of us boys to bring the calves from the calf pasture each evening and ride them in. Now, riding calves is about as much fun as a ranch boy can possibly have. The calf is roped around the neck, and a half hitch, called a Basil, is put around his nose. Then, using the rope as a bridle, the boy mounts. Until the calf is gentled, it will pitch like a bay steer. One calf that I remember particularly was a black heifer with a white face. She became very gentle, and we called her Pet. I trained Pet so well that I could mount her and guide her all over the calf pasture. Usually, no matter how well we broke to riding, a calf won't go where you want it to go. It won't go anywhere. Saddles don't fit cows or grown cattle, and although it was sometimes fun to saddle yearlings, what actually riding we did was on bareback. As we grew older, caught range cattle coming from the big pen to water and rode the cows and yearlings. Each of us children had a few head of cattle to call our own. They were for the most part doggies or of doggy origin. A doggy is the motherless calf. Oh, cool. Didn't know that. When one is found on the range, it will be brought in. Some cow with a calf like age will be tied at night and morning, forced to let the motherless calf share her milk. We had one old muley cow that was so kind to doggies that the doggie always fared better than her own offspring. She would moo to it and lick its hair and otherwise mother it. Pet was originally a doggie. When she grew up and had calves of her own, we milked her. If she was a good saddle horse, a red roan calf that she had was a better one. Pet had so many calves, and those calves grew up and had so many calves of their own, that a little stock of cattle coming from her helped materially to put me through college one year. Damn. We went to a country school, which was on our own ranch, where the children of 5 or 6 other ranch families attended. Most of them rode to school horseback. One of our games was cats and dogs. This, we boys, for girls did not join in, played at noon recess. The cats would sit on the brush afoot. About 3 minutes later, the dogs, mounted on horses, yelling like Apache Indians, would take after them. The brush had thorns, and the idea of a cat was to get into the bush so thick that the dog could not follow him, or to crawl into a thicket where he could not be seen. Sometimes the chase would last long until after the bell had sounded. I remember one great chase that kept us out until 3 o'clock. An hour later, 8 or 9 boys were alone with the teacher and a pile of Wahuya stick switches. Another game on horseback that the older boys played was tournament. 3 posts were erected in a line 100 yards apart. Each post has an arm on wood about a yard long. Hanging from the arm was a metal ring about 2 inches in diameter. It is held by a spring clasp so that it can be easily disengaged. The runner takes a sharpened pole, the tournament pole, in his right hand, and holding it level with the points out in front of him, runs lickety-split down the line of rings trying to spear them. The game requires skill. Buck was wonderfully smooth on a horse, and he and I together hooked plenty of rings. So basically, they were doing a medieval tournament. Cool. My sisters and girl cousins joined in playing Indian and in making houses. Our ranch was built on a dry arroyo, or a creek named Long Hollow. Just below the house, this creek had bluffs about 40 feet high. For years, we children worked periodically at digging caves back into the bluffs. Here we played Indian. If the soil had not been so gravelly and consequently inclined to cave in, we might have made dwelling places as ample as some of the ancient cliff dwellings. As it was, we got the caves big enough for us to hide in. When Long Hollow ran water after the rain, we made water wheels of sticks and corn stalks and watched them turn. The house of our own construction that we enjoyed most was in a tree. It was a live oak called the coon tree, from the fact that the coon hungry for chickens had once been found in it. Climbing up this tree was an enormous Mustang grapevine. This grapevine afforded us all kind of ladder to the limbs of the coon's tree. We took planks up there to these limbs and nailed them so that they had a solid floor. In our country, we did not have many fruits, but around the ranch house were prolific pomegranate bushes. No matter how dry the season, these pomegranates always bore fruit. In the summertime, we would pick the pomegranates, borrow some sugar, spoons, and glasses from the kitchen, and with a jug of water gather on the platform of the coon tree for a picnic. We had a rope with which to pull up the jug and the bucket containing other articles. The point of this picnic was to make pomegranate out of sugar and fruit seeds and water. Sometimes we took books and read on the coon tree. Beautiful Joe and Black Beauty were our favorites. Our real had matting on the floor, and when this matting was discarded, we covered the platform of the coon tree with it. We felt that we had reached the height of luxury. I don't understand why none of us ever fell out of the coon tree. I have spoken of our life with horses and calves. There were other animals to interest us, as there always are in the country. The trees about the ranch were inhabited each spring and summer by a hundred of jackdaws, a kind of blackbird. They built their nests in the trees so flimsily that disaster to newly hatched birds was inevitable. Before they could even fly or even walk, young birds would fall out of the trees and sprawl helplessly on the ground, a ready prey for cats, turkeys, and other enemies. The distressed cries of the parent jackdaws were at times almost deafening, and these parents could do nothing toward getting their young back into their nests. We used to pick up the young birds and put them in straw-filled wood nail kegs, which we placed on the roofs of the shed and smokehouse under the coon tree. I have seen 3 or 4 parent jackdaws feeding their young at the same time out of one of these kegs. Sometimes each keg held as many as 8 young birds. Scissortails built their hanging nest out of the very tops of our higher trees, but their young never fell out. We never tired of watching the scissortails fly, especially if they were chasing a hawk, darting his head and driving him away. The wrens nested in toolboxes on the stable, and coils of rope, and even the leather toe fenders called tapaderos covering the stirrups of saddles. When we found these nests, we made it our duty to warn our father and the Mexican laborers not to disturb them. One time a saddle had to go unused for weeks until a wren that had built a nest in a tapadero, one stirrup, had brought off her brood. Under Mother's direction, we raised chickens, turkeys, and guineas. The guineas were good watchdogs, alarming with their wild cries everything and everybody within hearing distance when a hawk was approaching. Hawks, chicken snakes, and coyotes were constant enemies of the barnyard. We boys sometimes set traps for the coyotes. I remember seeing my mother, before I was old enough to handle a gun, shoot one with a rifle very near the house. The evening call of the bobwhite brought, as it yet brings, a wonderful peace. In the early evenings of certain times of the year, we could hear wild turkeys yelping out in the brush back of the field. Once a large flock of them grazed up to the schoolhouse, but the teacher would not let us out to chase them. Although deer were plentiful and some other children in the country had a pet fawn, we never had one. Once, while riding in the pasture, I halted a long time to watch a doe kill a rattlesnake. Damn. I can honestly say that we did not enjoy tormenting animals, and that we did not rob birds' nests. But when we snared lizards with a horsehair looped on the end of a pole, when we poured buckets of water down the holes of ground squirrels to make them come out, and when we hitched honed toads to matchboxes, we no doubt did torment those animals. though we seldom injured them. I have since killed noble buck deer, mountain lions, wild boars, and other games, but no memory of hunting is so pleasant as that of rescuing little jackdaws, of restoring tiny dove fallen from its nest and watching, without molesting them, baby jackrabbits in their cotton-lined nests against the cow pen fence. Memories all of a ranch boy. Ranch girls and boys always find so many ways to play with so many creatures of nature to interest them that the days are never long enough. And no life can be long enough for a ranch bred boy or girl to forget the full times of childhood. Okay, and that gets us into part 4 of this book, Stories from South. And as usual, they start with a poem. When it was said that she was dead, we were inclined at first to doubt it. We felt we knew, if it were true, that she would have told us all about it. By Richard R. Kirk. Okay. Now this first story, dear Cubs, Sam's Four Bits by Irwin Rusell. Doubtless all of you enjoyed Christmas, but I question whether there was another boy in the United States who was as happy as Sam on the 25th of last December. Sam is a 7-year-old, and as bright as a little darky ever toted a bucket of water on his head or whisked a fly brush over a dinner table. His mother cooks for Master George, and Sam, consequently, is always to be found in the big house. Indeed, Sam comes from an aristocratic family. For generations, his people have been house servants without a field hand among them, and have never resided in their quarters. Sam is quite the pet with everyone. He is useful, too, and as well as ornamental. He feeds the chickens with grace that is all his own, and every evening at sunset his voice can be heard for at least a mile calling up the pigs. Pig-oo-wee! On Christmas Eve, Sam hung up his stocking by the dining room chimney, looked up the flue to see if there was anything in there that would stop Santa Claus from coming down, and then trotted away to the kitchen garret to bed. Whether he dreamed of Santa Claus, and if so, how his imagination pictured the little Dutch saint, it was impossible to say, but one thing is certain, he got up unusually early the next morning. The day had scarcely begun to break when Sam's father, Uncle Henry, and old Aunt Phyllis, his mother, were aroused by the shout of "Christmas gift, Pappy! Christmas gift, Mommy! Christmas gift! I done caught you before!" Then Sam hurried on his clothes and hastened over to the house to examine his stocking. And there it was, just as he left it, except that it was full instead of empty. Full of what? Lordy, what a big orange! What's this? Another orange. I expect no. This is an apple. Ooh, just look at the candy. What else in there? Sam thought that was all, but he took the stocking by the toe and shook it, and out dropped a silver coin. Money? I wonder how much this is. About $11. Maybe I go in and ask Mammy. So Sam ran to show his father and mother what Santa Claus had brought him. "For bets and Stoba," said Aunt Phyllis. "Bless my soul, I ain't seen no silver before since Reb times. Give me that money, Sam, and I'll let me put it away for Big Chris." Now, this didn't suit Sam at all. He had seen a great many things go into the big chest that never came out again, and he was by no means disposed to let his shinning 4-bit piece meet such with destiny. No, mammy, he said. Just please let me keep it. I ain't gonna lose it. Besides, that chest sets right up the chimney. And old Santy might come down and open it and take his money out again. Oh, let the child have his money, Phyllis, said Uncle Henry. If he loses it, tain't much, and it'll learn him to be careful. Let him keep it. Little side cubs, I am actually reading it as it is written in here, turn typed. So I'm not trying to change anything in here. Anyway, so Sam kept his money. Baron Rothschild never felt as rich as he did. He would sit about in the corners talking to himself and looking at his 4 bits. If he went across the yard, he would stop every few steps to feel in his pocket and see if it was still there. Indeed, never before did 50 cents seem so important to anyone since the time when David Glass went for a fight for nothing but a silver $half. David up with a brick, and Glass with a lick, that the people over Jordan heard him holler. Sam enjoyed his orange, his apple, and his pumpkins, and his candy. But the charms of all these, and they all had many, paled before the brightness of the silver. He was never tired of examining it. He wondered whether the bird on the side was a hawk, or a buzzard, or a turkey. He had tried to count the notches on the rim, but as he didn't know what came after 5, he was obligated to give up after an attempt to despair. When dinner time came, Aunt Phyllis made Sam a little cake, and she pressed the coin down on the dough as to leave a very beautiful impression. The cake was baked, and although the mark of the $half became much distorted with the cooking, still, if you looked very hard, you could see what it had been. Sam thought it was a wonderful work of art. He carried it off at the back of the gower steps and sat down and ate it, beginning at the edges and eating up to the mark, until he had a round piece just the size of the coin, with the impression on one side. Then he played with that a while and finished by eating it also. Time now hung heavy on Sam's hands. He began to think, or study, as he would have expressed it, about what to do next. What he did next was to lay his 4 bits down on the ground near the steps, then walk off around the corner of the house. Directly came back, walking slowly and looking at it as if he lost something. He kicked among the grass, shaded his eyes with his hands, and appeared to be very anxious. Let me see, he said. I come along this way yesterday, and I reckon I lost that money somewhere about this place. I must have dropped it out of my pocket. I wonder if anybody picked it up. Nausy, I done found it. Right under my eyes. If it had been a snake, it would have bit me. I never seed a scene like old Hickey was up. So saying, he picked up the money with great demonstrations of joy. Then he laid it down in another place and marched off as before. This time, however, the play turned out differently. There was a venerable Shanghai rooster that stayed in the yard that everyone called Old Jack. He was very old and very cross, and he and Sam were deadly enemies. Many a fight had they had, and although Sam generally got the best of it, Old Jack used to give him a great deal of trouble. Now, just as Sam went around the corner of the house, Old Jack stalked around carefully, closely examining the ground, in his quest for a beetle or a worm, or some other agreeable delicacy of that sort. The bright piece of silver attracted his eye, and he advanced towards it. He had not yet determined whether or not it was good to eat, and was about to be examined closer, But back came the owner. At the sight of his foe, old Jack seized the coin and ran, intending to carry it off and inspect it at his leisure. Oops. Sam set up a tremendous yell and gave chase. Old Jack ran first in one direction and then in another, but finding himself closely pursued, he took refuge beneath the smokehouse. This building, like nearly all houses in the South, was raised off the ground on small pillars about a foot high, and old Jack had gone under it with Sam's money. He dropped it on the ground and crowed loudly, adding insult to injury. Bird. Sam began to cry, but that triumphant crow changed his currents bad thought. He resolved upon measures of war. Arming himself with corncobs, he began to vigorously fire on the enemy. Old Jack, however, did not appear to mind it much. It was hard to throw corncobs under a house with any degree of force or precision. Sam discharged all he could find, but in vain. Then he sat down and scratched his head. "I was going to get that money somehow," he said. "I just have to have it." "Sure, there's no talk about it. Old Jack's got to get out from under there. You heard me. I ain't a fool now." So Sam got down on the ground and began crawling under the smokehouse. Whether old Jack dreaded the combats in such close quarters, or whether he had fully satisfied himself that the half-dollar was too hard to be digestible, or whether he was influenced by both considerations is unknown. But when he saw Sam, he rushed from his retreat, leaving the silver piece behind him. But Sam was too quick for him. He grasped old Jack by the leg and scooped up his corn with the other hand. "Dar, that's business. This old rooster's starts to have his neck broke. I'll fix him before long," said Sam as he ran towards the house with old Jack in his hands. But suddenly changing his mind, he dropped the rooster and pulled his half-dollar from his pocket. The money had gotten rather dirty under the house. So had Sam. And then he was dirty already, so it didn't make any difference. The 4 bits, however, must be cleaned right away, thought Sam, so he went off to the kitchen to wash it. Before he got there, however, he stopped and seemed to consider. A splendid idea had occurred to him. He had seen his mother use an egg to clarify the coffee every morning, and thought came to him. If an egg could clear coffee of those black, muddy grounds, would it not be just the thing to brighten up his 4 bits? And it was worth trying anyway, he thought. "There's that little Dominica kind of cackling now," said Sam. "She's just done laid. Wonder if I can get the egg out of this about Mammy seeing me." He peeped into the kitchen. There was Aunt Phyllis, fast asleep in front of the fire. Then he went and got the egg, carried it around back of the house, and sat down. And having broken one end of the shell, he poured the contents over his piece of money. "I'll let it stay on there a little while," thought he, "so's to let it get right clean." In the meantime, he went into the kitchen and got a gourd full of water out of the pagan, which he carried out with him. Thinking that it was not fully time, he proceeded to wash the egg off. What was to his horror to find out that his precious 4 bits had turned black. Sam looked at it woefully. He tried to wash the stain off, but he couldn't. What was to be done? He was afraid to ask his mammy because she would certainly whip him. He concluded to go see Master George. That gentleman was enjoying a pipe and a newspaper when Sam rushed in crying, "Oh, Master George, Master George, my silver done turned to an old piece of iron." "How's this, Sam?" said Master George, looking at the coin. "What have you been doing to it?" "I done I ain't done nothing to it, sir, replied Sam. Only just put some egg on it to clean off the dirt, and now it's done and gone black as ice. Put egg on it? Yes, sir. Steve made me clear in the trash of old coffee with an egg. Sam considered the loud laughter which followed as a deep personal insult, but he forgave Master George for cleaning his 4 bits for him. When he received it, it was wet, and Sam ran out of the kitchen to dry it. He laid it on a chip close to the fire and sat down to watch it, singing to himself, not loud enough to disturb his mammy, a verse the only song he knew. When I jumped over the mantelpiece, shallow, I greased my heels with candle grease. Wake 'em up, shallow. Just look, said Sam when he was finished the song. There's that nice little piece of 4 bits laying on the fire, winking in the ashes, just as happy as a terrapin when an old quart of cool water's on him. Wonder if it knows it's Christmas. Christmas is the best time of days. They ought to have it once a week instead of Sunday. What's the reason watermelon's never as ripe at Christmas? Hey, the chip's on fire. Sam seized his money. It was hot, and the old Aunt Phyllis, who had been enjoying a heavenly vision of a fat possum baked in sweet potatoes, awoke with a great start at her son's cry of anguish. You, Sam, what you doing, sir? Oh, ma'am, that nasty 4 bits. What's the matter with it? asked Aunt Phil, and she stooped and picked up. Then there was another howl of wrath and agony, a slap, an explanation. To relate what immediately followed would be too painful. We will only say that after a few minutes the wretched infant issued hastily from the door with tears in his eyes, and his 4 bits, which had now got cool, in his hand. Melancholy could not last long with Sam. The fountain of his tears was like those of spring rains that never runs except immediately after a rain, so within a few minutes he forgot his troubles. There was a well in the yard, which was one of Sam's favorite places to resort. The low wooden box that covered it made an excellent seat, and it was delightfully exciting to drop a rock down in the water and hear the splash it made. Sam left the place, and he went there with his $half and sat down. He laid the silver down on the side, and regarded it with all the airs of a capitalist. I ain't made up my mind with yet, said Sam, what I was going to do with this money. Let's see, shall I buy him a mule like my pappy's? I don't know. I want some sardines and a shotgun, and 3 or 4 hogs, and Spanish hop, and several other things. Maybe before Dips won't get 'em all. How much is 4 bits? I know what Herbert's snaffle bits for horses is, but never heard of bits for bits. Well, let me see. Next time Pappy goes to town with the wagon, I was going to ask him, can I go along? Then I can look at all the stores and see what I want. Dar, I knows. Master George, he pays me for picking blackberries. I'll get a bucket. Last time he paid me with candy. I'll ask him if he'll pay me in money next time. But then I'll get a whole heap for my 4 bits and money to buy more buckets. Get them his in the quarters to pick for me and pay him half of what they makes. And then here the youthful Alnasher jerked up his foot in ecstasy, and it struck the $half. The soliloquy came to an abrupt end, and the 4 bits had gone down the well. A broad crack came from the boards, just where it ought not to have been, and received an unlucky coin. And Sam heard it when it struck the water below. Here was a death blow to the bucket and the blackberry scheme of fortune. Sam would have turned pale if he could. Oh, now, ain't that the mischief? He said, looking down over the well. There was no use in looking, however. The money was gone for good. So Sam straightened himself up, drew a long breath, and went off to find old Jack, saying to himself, I don't care, what's the difference? The old fellow Bits was more trouble than his wife, anyhow. Oh, okay. Yeah. It actually started, don't see. It's 10 o'clock, I've been going an hour. Huh, weird. Yeah. Some two story. No. Yeah, two stories. All right. Next shorter story, thankfully, is The White Face Bumblebee by J.A. Macon. What you doing there, boy? Uncle Gabe was speaking to a very black little Negro who was playing near him on the floor. Say, what you doing there? What you slapping at Bumblebee for? You ain't trying to catch him, is you? Well, drive ahead. First thing you know, you'll think that you had a coal fire in hand. Hello, Uncle Gabe, the little fellow replied. This sort of bumblebee don't sting. This is the sort that burrows holes in pine logs. Don't you see his little white face? What has his face got to do with his stinger? No, I'd just like to know that. Maybe you don't know which end the bumblebee keeps his devilment in, does you? Ah, no, I got him, Uncle Gabe. See, there he doesn't know how to sting. Wait, let me put him in just in your hand. And looky here, you little chunk of midnight. If you touch me with that wild bumblebee, I'll think you a hurricane done hit you. Sure enough, yes, you fooling with the wrong somebody now. If I was to stand loose on you with this plow line, you'd think a swarm of yellow jackets was telling you howdy. You look in a bumblebee face and tell me if he can sting. Can you tell if a mule can kick by examining his face? Yes, I expect you look the bulldog's on legs and tell if he could bite. Sonny, you mixing things up mighty bad. Don't always judge folks by the things they done in front of them. You can't tell much about the cider in the jug by looking at the stopper, and you can't tell what size jug of egg a hen laid just by looking at her mouth. Uncle Gabe was silent for a little while, but soon began to talk to himself in a low and indistinct tone, as if he did not care to be heard. Projecting with the gambling on the bumblebee. Well, that beats you my times, yo. Things gonna move so fast these days, anyhow. Children ain't satisfied with the old-fashioned plan of doings. They think they're mowing the menfolk. Won't have no bumblebees poked at me, backing mofos and front mofos. Oh. God. Jay and Megan, you're a pain in the ass to read your stories. There's another one from him. Uncle Gabe's Mule by J.A. Macon. Whoa, whoa, you wall-eyed scoundrel, whoa! These angry exclamations came from Uncle Gabe. He had hauled a load of watermelons at the town, and having unhitched the mule from the little carts, was leading it to a tree to tie it, when the animal became suddenly unmanageable. Whoa, whoa, you rusty old fool! You just cutting up them shines to show off for the town folks. Now keep quiet, sir. If you had gotten hind foots tangled up in the telegraph wire, and you'd have been a nice fix sure enough. I reckon by the time I take off half of the old corn fund, you might, you might feed to a jerk some of that old back action out of you. Nothing but a blame of sandhill mule. I hired you from out of the range in watermelon season, and just 'cause I give you better feeds than you've been used to, you mustn't go and roar and pitch and kick up about you've been used to hauling loads of pine tags and oak leaves out of the golden hillsides. But I'll broke you to the watermelon business for this summer's out. You folks never would know what an outlandish sort of critter that mule is. No suspicions about him for the fuss got him. When you see a mule with one eye overstating and stiff up straight, and another ear draping round a slacker limbo, you may know you got hold of an staring animal. Well, it looks like some of these here wild mules spoil a heap of living, but heaps of men to discover when he got a hold of the right article. If a man can plow from the spring plumb until the land time without rubbing the paint off his legging, he may know he's got that sort of stand. But 'tis a mighty good thing that mules can't have no children. If they could, there'd be such a pile of devil rolled up in 'em and handed down from old to the young, from generation to generation, that arter while they'd just take charge of the plantation. Without further observation, Uncle Gabe prepared to expose his watermelons for sale. Uncle Gabe. Ugh, man. Okay. The next one is Thanksgivin Blessin by H.L. Pilner. H.L. Piner. Sit down, Lindy. Where's your manners? Ain't you got no reason, child? Don't be reclining across the table, possum set till you chillin' while. Don't you know this is Thanksgivin'? We's a gun and a prayer. For we teaches them their possums if them taters get back there. Now, old woman, keep these children while their hands with a bow down low, whilst I offers up the blessings for the family. Hands down, so. Lord, we don't know how to measure what you does up there in the sky, but we knows in your giving that you never pass us by, and we's grateful for the things you continues to dispense. From the corn cribs to the smokehouse and your loving providence, thank the Lord for all his blessings, especially them that he ordains. For the nigger's faithful stomach and the hunger it contains, sass and red meat watermelons storming up the natal juice. Of the summertime's bees just honey for the home's nigger's use. And we thank you, Lord, for rosin yas and your further yalla jam, for the corn cake and dashes and the ham bone and the ham. Remembers most kindly for the bacon and the beans, and for good pot liquor extra wild with jowl and turnip greens. And they ain't no model music for us niggas here below, like the hubbing of the gobbler and the rooster's lottie crow. For this blessings and all others, we is grateful, Lord, always. But but we left to chime up higher than the old possum's praise. 'Cause we shouts and hallelujahs for the making of the beast is the covenant of with the nigger and this here Thanksgiving feast. Link, what your mouth so greasy? Randy, what you munching on? Stop, you sacrilegious varmint. Where's the biggest tater gone? Drop in the back there, Lizzie. Hear me. This here ain't no eating race. Now, old woman, mind these children whilst I finish saying grace. Lord, they tells me that the possum am the oldest critter yet, and we knows that you preserved him for this nigger's benefit. And we thank you, Lord, for these two, 'cause they was fat and hale, from the whiskers of the nostrils and the coral and naked tail. 'Cause their possum's good all over, and that tantalizing grin, to the marrow bones and chitlins and the gravy they've been skinned. Then we thanks the Lord for giving niggas educated taste, so as the king can eat possum without a single drop of waste. Angel look down on this picture, chillin', waiting for the peace. Every little mouse is dripping with thanksgivings at the feast. And the parents for praising him from all blessings flow, him that keeps the blackest nigger, same as them that's white as snow. Lord, we honor the traditions of the niggas to the end. Bless us with the taking decreases our stomachs now. Amen. Lordy mussy, where's them possums and them taters? They's gone too. And the gravy done soaked the bowl for the platters clean as new. Let Randy Zeke, old woman, if the last one ain't cut out. Man, the Pepsi had drumsticks, there's feet swell with the gout. Me a praying and a praising to the Lord that never fail. They are stealing at the altar, leaving nothing but the tail. Leaving misery to my innards, and the innards moaning on. Case I ask me blessing for I blowed the dinner home. But I promised the old woman and them children powerful strong that the next Thanksgiving prayer won't be so everlasting long. Again, I just want to say a disclaimer that I'm reading the book as it was written. Pronunciations are literally as they are written. I am adamant against censoring, for censoring destroys history. And I want you Cubs to know this happened, okay? And now I will continue. Hopefully. Yep. The Blacksmith of the Mountain Pass by John Basil Lamar. At the entrance of one of the gorges or gaps in the great Appalachian chain of mountains, and their passage across the northern portion of Georgia, a blacksmith had erected his forge in the early settlements of that region by an Anglo-American race, and drove a thrifty trade in the way of facing axes and pointing plows for the settlers, and shoeing horses for wayfaring people in their transit through the country to examine gold mines and land. As he was no ordinary personage in the affairs of the neighborhood, and will make a conspicuous figure in the narrative, some account of his peculiarities will not be under, uninteresting. Having acted through his life on a homely maxim of his own, pay up as you go up, he had acquired some money and was out of debt, and consequently enjoyed a glorious privilege of being independent in a degree that is unknown to many who occupy a larger portion of the world's attention than himself. He was a burly, well-looking man of 35, just young enough to feel that all facilities, mental and physical, had reached their greatest development, and just old enough to make past serve the finger posts of his future journey through life. With a shrewd but open, bold, and honest look, there was a gleeful expression in the corners of his eyes that spoke of fun. The laughing devil in his eye was not a malicious spirit, however. His physical confrontation was that which combined great strength with agility, and if he had been fated to have been a contemporary of the great prototype Vulcan, there can be no doubt that this Limian blacksmith would have allotted him a large forge in his establishment to act as a sort of pattern card, and to divert public gaze from his own game leg to the fair proportions of this foreman. Now, although Ned Forgerman, for such was the name he had inherited from a Gaelic ancestor, was a good-natured man, yet had the possession of great muscular strength and courage, and the admiration of such an exercise when those powers never failed to command, had somewhat spoiled him. Without meaning to injure any mortal, he had managed, nevertheless, to try his prowess on sundry of his neighbors, and from the success always crowned his efforts in that way, but unconsciously acquired the character of a bully. With very few eager advantages of elementary education, he had nevertheless, in different periods, collected a mass of heterogeneous information which he was very fond of displaying on occasions. He was a sort of political antiquary, and could tell the opinion of Mr. Jefferson or Mr. Madison on any subject, and was referred to on all disputed points of the theory and history of the government that arose among the candidates of the legislature and county politicians. This he studied on account of consequences invested with him, but why he had treasured up an old and well-thumbed copy of Paine's Age of Reason, and affected skepticism to the veracity of the story of Jonah and the whale, and Balaam and his ass, would be hard accounting for, unless it proceeded to desire the character for singularity and irritation. Yet, when vainly once when vanity once gets the mastery of a man's reason, there is no telling the absurdities it will lead him into. He was fond of speaking of Volney, and being found a copy of Taylor's Genesis in his hand, although few of his neighbors had read the author of the ruins, or knew what Dagnus meant. This peculiarity, together with the pertinacity of the missionaries, Washer and Butler, which carried them to the penitentiary, may account for great aversion of Mr. Edward Fogerman to all preachers of the gospel. His dislike for them was so excessive that he could scarcely speak of the hypocritical scoundrels, as he called them, without flying into a passion and using indecorous language. But a circumstance occurred which gave his zeal a distinct and sectarian direction. A Methodist preacher over in Tennessee, who was fond of splicing his discourses with anecdotes, once made the blacksmith the principal character in one long sermon. His peculiarities were dilated on, and his heresies dealt with, and becoming severity. He was ridiculed, and his literary acquirements disparaged by the preacher. All this came to the ears of Ferguson. With such additions and embellishments as stories usually receive in passing to a third person, it would be as useless to attempt to describe a mountain storm as to picture the wrath of the mountaineer. But if we cannot portray the storm, consequences may be easily told. The blacksmith swore in his wrath he would whip every Methodist preacher that passed the gap in revenge for his insult. Ferguson was a man of his word, as he bruised features of many John Wesley's disciples could testify. His character simmered abroad, and the good matrons of the surrounding countries on each side of the mountains trembled at his name. In short, the mountain pass, which was really as romantic a place as a landscape painter could seek in the picture, was just a spot to remind a youth of the classic studies of the place where Leonidas and his 300 Spartans fell and attempted to defend Greece against the array of Xerxes, and despite of the grandeur of beetling cliffs and the beauty of the verdure was associated with the minds of many pious persons with the broad gate that leads to destruction. And Ned Forgerson, the handsome blacksmith, was invested with all his attributes and hideous aspects of his satanic magistry by many a mountain girl who would doubtless have fallen in love at first sight with him under any other name. The preacher, whose circuit lay on either side of the mountain at the time of Ned's direful edict, was promulgated to the world, was a meek and lowly man, who approached nearly in his natural disposition to willing obedience to the mandate relative of turning the cheek to the smiter. The poor soul passed many sleepless nights in view of the fate that awaited him on the mountain pass. In his dreams he saw Forgerson with a huge sledgehammer in hand, ready to dash out his brains, and would start with such violence as to wake himself. He inquired if there was no other place in which the mountain could be passed, only to learn doom more certainly. Being a timid man, but withal devoutly impressed with a sense of duty, he resolved to discharge his duties faithfully, be the consequences what they might. Like a lamb going to the slaughter, he did wend his way towards the gap. As he came in front of the shop, the blacksmith was striking the last blow of a shovel and singing away the tune of the clear of the kitchen. Oh, Georgia is a noble state. Her laws are good and her people great. On catching a glimpse of the poor parson, who had flattened himself, he was about to pass with impunity, Ned sang out, "Stop there, you eternal shad belly, and pay the penalty for my injured reputation." The holy man protested innocence of having ever intentionally injured him by word or deed. The man's subdued looks and earnest voice had half dissuaded Ned from his stern purpose, when the giggling of a striker and the cheering of two or three idlers nerved him to what he felt was need. Let anyone pause a moment and reflect if he was never urged on the acts conformed smote for him by the opinions of others before Mr. Forgerson is sentenced as a devil. The preacher received several boxes on his ears and heard many denunciations against his sect before he was permitted to depart, and when the permission was received, he was not slow in availing himself of the privilege. At the next annual conference, when circuits were assigned to different preachers, this one made his appearance punctually, but by some promise of casuistry convinced himself that duty did not call for a revelation. of his sufferings. If he was too sensitive of the blacksmith's character to expose it to rude remarks, or if he had a preference that some worthier brother should occupy the healthy situation among the nuns, is difficult for conjecture. But Forgerson's reputation had extended beyond the circuit, and was done ample and extended beyond ample and severe justice by others who had heard of his fame. It soon became the subject of animated conversation, and there was no little wincing, each one fearing it would be his cruel fate to be sent a victim to appease the wrath of this human minotaur against the Methodist Church. After a time, it was decreed that the Reverend Mr. Stubbleworth was the doomed individual, and when the initiation came, many an eye of mingled pity and curiosity was turned on his ruddy, good-natured face to see how the dispensation was born, but not a muscle moved. With a quiet smile, he professed a perfect willingness to go where he was sent. He was clay in the hands of the potter, he said. If he piqued himself to a stolid indifference to the blacksmith pummeling, or if he relied on his ample dimensions to protect himself, he never disclosed, but appeared as self-satisfied and content as ever. His predecessor looked for all the world like a mouse who just escaped the fangs of some terrible grimalkin. Grimalkin? What the hell's a grimalkin? The Reverend Mr. Stubbleworth was very much pleased with his new situation. Having been transferred from a level pinewoods country near the confines of Florida, the novelty of mountain scenery and a pure, bracing atmosphere seemed to inspire him with new life. Complimenting all the mothers on the singular beauty and intelligence of their children, with a delicate allusion to their own personal appearance, he soon became the general favorite. Mr. Stubbleworth knew which side of his bread the butter was on. The time arrived for his departure to visit the Tremolantine portion of the pastoral care, and he was warned of the dangers he was about to encounter. But they were heard with the same placid smile. The worthy leaders pictured of him chimeras dire, sufficient to have robbed the zeal of any other individual. But that gentleman quieted their fears by appearing to the power that they tempers the wind of the shore land. With a countenance as lamb-like as could be imagined, he departed singing, "At home or abroad, on the land or the sea, as thy once made a man, shall thy strength ever be." They watched him until his portly person and horse grew dim in the distance, and turned away, sighing that he was such a good man should fall into the hands of that monster, the blacksmith. Forgerson had heard of this new victim, and rejoiced that his size and appearance furnished much better for his vengeance than the attenuated fame of the late parson. Oh, what a nice beating he would have! He heard too that the Methodist preachers were rather spirited, and hoped this one might prove so, that he might provoke him to a fight. Knowing the clergyman must pass on Saturday in the afternoon, he gave his striker a holiday, and, reclining on a bench, regaled himself on the beauties of Tom Paine, awaiting the arrival of the preacher. It was not over an hour before he heard the words, "How happy they are who the Saviour obey, and have laid upon their treasure above," sung in a full and clear voice, and soon the vocalist, turning the angle of the road, rode leisurely up, with a contented smile on his face. "How are you, old slab-sides? Get off your horse and join me in my devotions," said the blacksmith. I have many miles to ride, answered the preacher. I haven't any time, my friend. I'll call as I return. Your name is Stubbleworth, and you are the hypocrites the Methodists have sent here. My name is Stubbleworth, he replied meekly. Didn't you know my name was Ned Forgerson, the blacksmith that whips every Methodist preacher that goes through the gap? Was asked with an audacious look. And how dare you come here? The preacher replied that he had heard of Mr. Forgerson's name, but presumed that he did not molest well-behaved travelers. You presumed so. Yes, you are the most presumptuous people, you Methodists, that ever trudged through leather. Anyhow, well, what I'll do if I don't whip you this time, you beef-headed disciple, you. Mr. Stubbleworth professed his willingness to do anything reasonable to avoid such penance. Well, there's three things you have to do, or I'll maul you into jelly. The first is you're to quit preaching. The second is that you must wear this last will and testament of Thomas Paine next to your heart. Read it every day, and believe every word that you read. The third is you're to curse the Methodists in every crowd you get into. Well, the preacher looked on during these novel propositions without a frown on his face being moved, and at the end replied that the terms were unreasonable and he would not submit to them. Well, you've got a whaling to submit to then. I'll larrup you like blazes. I'll tear you into dull rags and cornered ways. Get down, you bugger. The preacher remonstrated, and Ferguson walked up to the horse and threatened to tear him off it if he did not dismount. Whereupon the preacher made the virtue necessity and lighted. I have but one request to make, my friend. That is, you won't beat me with this overcoat on. It was a present from the ladies in my last circuit, and I do not wish to have it torn. Off with it then, and that suddenly, you basin-faced imp, you. The Methodist preacher slowly drew off his overcoat as the blacksmith continued his tirade of abuse on himself and his sect, and as he drew his right hand on the sleeve, he drew the garment behind him and dealt Mr. Ferguson a tremendous blow between his eyes, which laid the person at full length on the ground, with the testament of Thomas Paine beside him. The Reverend Mr. Stubbleworth, with the tact of a connoisseur in such matters, did not wait for his adversary to rise, but mounted him with the quickness of a cat, and as he bestowed his blows with about his hand to the stomach and face of the blacksmith, continued his song where he had left off in his arrival at the smithy. Tongue cannot express the sweet comfort of peace, of a soul in the earliest love. Until Mr. Forgerson, having experienced first love, or some other sensation equally new to him, responded lustily, "Enough, enough! Take him off!" But unfortunately there was no one to perform such a kind office except the old roan, and he munched a bunch of grass and looked up as quietly as his master was happy at a camp meeting. "Now," said Mr. Subworth, "there are three things you must promise me before I let you up." "What are they?" asked Ferguson eagerly. "The first is you will never molest a Methodist preacher again." Here Ned's pride rose and he hesitated, and the reverend gentleman, with his usual benign smile on his face, renewed his blows in song. I rode on the sky, freely justified I, and the moon it was under my feet. This oriental language overcame the blacksmith. Such bold figures or something else caused him to sing out, "Well, I'll do it, I'll do it." "You're going on very well," said Mr. Snubworth. "I think I can make a decent man out of you yet, and perhaps a Christian." Ned groaned. "The second thing I require of you is to go to the Pumpkin Vine Creek meeting house and hear me preach tomorrow." Ned attempted to stammer out some excuse. That is, when the divine resumed his devotional hymn, and kept in time with the music by striking him over the face with the fleshy part of his hand. "My soul mounted higher on the chariot of fire, nor did envy Elijah his seat." Ned's promise of punctuality caused the parson's exercise to cease, and the words redolent of gorgeous imagery died away in echoes of the adjacent crags. "Now, the third and last demand I make of you is peremptory." Ned was all attention to know what's to come next. "You are to promise to seek religion day and night, and never rest until you obtain it at the hands of the merciful Redeemer." The fallen man looked at the declining sun, then at the parson, and knew not what to say. When the latter individual began to raise his voice in song once more, and Ned knew what would come next. "I'll do my best," he said, in a humbled voice. "Well, that's a man," Mr. Stubberworth said. "Now get up and go down to the branch and wash your face, dust off your clothes, and tear up Mr. Paint's Testament, and turn your thoughts on high." Ned rose with feelings he had never experienced before. "Oh, raid? Cool." "Hey, Talbot." "Hey, Altered. Thanks for coming in." Sound of it's not working. Weird. Thanks for coming in, everyone. Um, I've been reading from Echoes of the Southland. I think about 2 pages left of the story. So this is actually about the current story is about a blacksmith that was insulted by a Methodist preacher, and he decided that he was just going to beat every Methodist preacher who came through his pass. And he just got himself beaten up by a Methodist preacher. Oh, wait. I think I hear someone else is going to come and raid. Wow. Another second raid. So, what are we reading tonight?
Yeah, microphone's picking up my fan. Let's see. The Ned arose with feelings he had never experienced before and went to obey the lavatory injunction of the preacher. When that gentleman mounted his horse, took Ned by the hand, and said, "Keep your promises, and I'll keep your counsel. Good evening, Mr. Forgerson. I'll look for you tomorrow." And off he rode, with the same imperturbable countenance, singing as loud as to scare the eaglets from the eyrie and the overhanging rocks. Well, thought Ned, this is a nice business. What would people say if they knew that Edward Ferguson was whipped before his own door by the Gap by a Methodist preacher, too? But his musings were more sorrow than in anger. The disfigured countenance of Forgerson was, of course, the subject of numerous questions that night among his friends, to which he replied with a stern look they well understood, and the vague remark that he had met with an accident. Of course, they never dreamed of the true cause. Forgerson looked in the glass and perhaps compared the changing hues of his black eye from a recent scuffle to the rainbow in a shipwreck scene, blending every color into one. Or perhaps he had never read the story and only muttered to himself, "Ned Forgerson whipped by a Methodist preacher." His dreams that night were a confused and disagreeable nature, and waking in the morning, he had an indistinct memory of something unpleasant having occurred. At first, he could not recollect the cause of his feelings, but the bruises on his face and body soon called it to mind, as well as the promise. He mounted his horse in silence and went to redeem it. From that time, his whole conduct manifested a change of feeling. The gossips of the neighbors observed it and whispered that Ned was silent and serious, and had gone to meeting every Sunday since the accident. They wondered at his burning the books he used to read so much. Strange stories were circulated as to the metamorphosis of the jovial daredevil Blacksmith to a gloomy and taciturn man. Some supposed, very sagely, that a spirit had enticed him into the mountains, and after giving him a glimpse into the future, had led him to the crag, where he had fallen and bruised his face. Others gave the Prince of Darkness the credit for the change, but none suspected the Methodist preacher. As the latter gentleman had no vanity to gratify, the secret remained with Ned. His gloomy state of mind continued until Forgerson visited a camp meeting. The Reverend Mr. Stapleworth preached a sermon that seemed to enter his soul and relieve it of its burden, and the song of "How happy we are who their Saviour obey" was only halfway through when it felt like a new man. Forgerson was from that time a shouting Methodist. At love feast, a short time subsequent, he gave in his experience and revealed the mystery of his conviction and conversion to his astonished neighbors. The Reverend Simon Stubblewort, who had faithfully kept the secret until that time, could sustain himself no longer, but gave vent to his feelings in the convulsive peals of laughter as the burning tears of overfelt joy coursed their way down his cheeks. "Yes, my brethren," he said, "it's all facts. I did maul the grace into this unbelieving soul. There's no doubt." The blacksmith of the mountain pass became a happy man and a Methodist preacher. I guess so. Apparently, Methodists don't take any guff, really. Oh, yeah. Let's see. The next one is thankfully a shorter story. How the Redbird Won His Colors by Martha Young. Way back days, the red bird was a plain color gray as the dove is today. He could hide himself in this commonness in the grass than any bird can today. He one them days no such a fire red, rose red bird as he is now. Moan that he won't been such a love sound bird as he is now. How is he a love sound bird? This how. If a gal see the red bird don't make no migration about she see him, then that gal going show see her true love for the next incoming Saturday night. Oh, this is how it's written, people. One long time ago, the bird mating season, Mr. Redbird done choose himself a mate. A little gray bird does like itself. Him and her was a singing in the deep woods, singing together, flying apart, then singing together again, like bird does, when they heard such a running and breaking through the bushes. Mr. Redbird, he flied for what he can see the matter be. Dar in the deep woods, they see the deer just running. He done this pull his head out of the honey hole for the rare rabbit. Done fool him sticking in. And dar briar deer, though the wild woods, ain't see where he gone. His face all skint and red and raw and dripping blood. Mr. Redbird, he got a mighty trembling, tender heart, so he feels as strenuous for deer near briar deer. That he fly right up to him and right up and down briar deer's bleeding face to fly, wiping the blood over their face with his wings. Up and down he fluttered, wiping briar deer's face, though he got such blood the same color as briar deer's face been wipe off them cobwebs. Blood don't drip in Briar Deer's eyes no more, and Briar Deer can see the way clear and get safe home. But Mr. Red Beard there, when he done got the weapons of Briar Deer's face with his wings, he didn't have a dry gray feather on it. He was teetotal blood red all over. He was immersed in blood. He been blood red ever since. He's the reddest thing that goes, and he's as red as any rose. Oh, oh man. That was hard to read. And that's who wrote that one? Because that was definitely the same language as Song of the South stories. Martha Young. Uh, yeah, that is the person who wrote Song of the South. Let's see. Let's see. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is, when was that story written? Uh, Redbird, Redbird, Redbird. Check Rabbit, content. Rich Blessin. Where is it? Fox. Um, let's see. Really save that story anywhere. Oh wait, there's. Okay, 1892. Yeah, 1892. That is a very old story. Okay, I'm gonna do one more story. It looks like it's 7 pages long. uh, yeah, I'm gonna read it anyway. This one is Dick by John Trotwood Moore. Okay. That for which the Saxon would die was lacking in Dick. Happy Dick. He was like a blackbird born in a cage. But if Dick didn't have his freedom bump developed, there was one he did have. That was love. Dick loved everybody, but he loved old Marster best of all. Before he could walk well, he used to watch the tall, gray-haired major dismount from a big, stocking-legged chestnut horse when he came in from riding on the farm. And he would stalk by Dick and stop and playfully crack his riding whip at him. Instead of running away with a half-fan terror, he grinned at the stately joker as other darkies did. Dick would crawl up to him like a frowsy spaniel with his long monkey fingers. He would... Okay, again, I'm not censoring this at all. So, this is how it was written. So, let me go. Dick would crawl up to him like a frowsy spaniel with his long monkey fingers. Hey, Aniharu. Okay. Since you're coming in, I'm gonna go ahead and warn you that some of these stories do have language issues from the Civil War. Reading's interesting, and some of the stories in here, I'm trying to read it as is written, and they wrote it as it was said. So pronunciation has been kind of a pain. Again, this is Civil War era writing, and you know, it's not exactly all. Definitely not politically correct, but seeing as I'm not that good at censoring, I try not to censor history because I just assume people know it happened. And some of the descriptions in the stories are. And this one sentence says quite a bit of it, so. Of course, these are really like long run-in sentences, and I don't think they would pass today's standards. Anyway, and even as an English major, this stuff makes me cringe. So, see, where was I? Dick would crawl up to him like a frowsy spaniel. With his long, monkey fingers, he would pick the cockleburrs and beggar's last from his master's leggings, and do it with an air of a dog when its owner deigns to rub its back with his foot. Oh. As he grew older, Dick was taken by the Major to the big house to wait on him. Then, indeed, was Dick's cup full. But one day, Dick's cup was fuller. It ran over. At one bound, he leaped into fame, and what was better for Dick, his master's heart. And this was the way it happened. Major Robinson was a noted horseman. He owned, or as was thought, the best in the land. His neighbor, Colonel Sellers, was also a noted horseman, and the colonel was quite possessive that his were the best in the land. The pride of each one's heart was a magnificent saddle stallion, and two grander horses, in truth, could not be found in the day's ride. Each could pace like a pickerel, and go as many saddle gates as a rocking chair in a steamboat deck. And looks, well, had a Rosa Honeyr seen them, there would have been two more of her famous pictures in the Royal Gallery. The Major's horse was a splendid chestnut, as perfect as a Tennyson poem, full of the thoroughbred blood from nose to heel, and known as Traveller. The Colonel's was a beautiful bay, as rounded as one's Johnson's periods, equally as well as bred as Traveller and known as Pilgrim. In those days, questions of superiority in saddle horses were decided in the show ring. Only thoroughbreds raced. With a saddler, it was looks and gaits. With a thoroughbred, speed. But Dick changed all that. Bright Dick. These two famous horses naturally met time and time again in the show ring, and being so nearly matched in breeding and gaits, sometimes Traveller would be awarded the first prize, and then it would fall to Pilgrim. Year after year did this go on throughout the fairs of Middle Tennessee, until finally it came merely a question of who the judges were as to who would win. The first thing was humorous, but it was soon excitingly serious, for as everybody in Tennessee where a horse is involved will take sides one way or the other. Soon all the country were travelers or pilgrims. How he came to think of it, I do not know. But one day that fall, when things were in a crisis, when Traveller had beaten Pilgrim in the show ring for the 40th time, the Pilgrim's horse 39 is against Traveller, when young men were fighting duels on the subjects and old men were calling each other names. Dick sat out in front of Traveller's stall, combing out his own head with a curly comb, as was customary with his race. Now, I do not know for certain, but I have always believed it was a currycomb that put the idea in Dick's head, because I have often noticed that when people want very earnestly to think of something, they always scratch their heads. It follows as a necessary conclusion that if there is any virtue in the scratching at all, it would also follow that the higher the heads were scratched, the brighter it would all be thought the thought would be result. Now Dick was combing away with all his might, for the kinks stuck out defiantly over his head, and all will admit that the idea evolved was simply brilliant. "Marster, does you know a traveler can pace mighty fast?" asked Dick to Major Robinson, come out to see where was feeding the horse. The Major smiled. "Of course I do, Dick. Why?" "But does you know he can pace mighty briefly, Mighty briefly, repeated Dick earnestly. You know, I do, said the Major. How did you find out? Have you been pacing this horse to water? Asked his master in a trifle surly. No, sir, said Dick in a tone of deeply grieved innocence, and then he laughed. But, master, if you'll ask me, and if I've been practicing him from water, I'd have to tell you the truth. For two of the day, I rode him down to the creek, and when a thunderstorm came up, I'd run home to get it wet. I tried to make him run, but he wouldn't. He just paced like a you're flying. Killed him. He beat the shower by a good length. Want that pacing from water? And Dick grinned again. And the Major had to laugh too. Master, said Dick sullenly, appears to me that there's no way of showing horses in the ring. Ain't no way to tell which one's the best. Any fat hoss gets a prize, but it takes grit to win a race, and the hoss that ought to have the prize, and the hoss that can go, that's got the winning and the limp at the bottom, and to stay ahead for thar. That's the hoss with something, ain't it? The Major smiled. Yes, Dick, but why? Dick jumped up with the intense earnestness in every feature. Master, he shouted, just challenge the pilgrim folks for the pacing race. Make it for miles. That'll settle it. And lowering his voice to be a confidential whisper, you know Taboo's got the blood to stay. The Major caught at the idea for a moment. Up to the same time, pacing races were practically unheard of in the state. The idea was novel, and certainly, as Dick said, would settle it. Without a word, he turned on his heels and went to the library, and promptly challenged the owner of Pilgrim to a 4 mile pacing race for a purse of $5,000. The challenge was as promptly accepted by Colonel Sellers, and Dick, poor little Dirk, claimed for him the honor of being the originator of the pacing races in Tennessee. It is needless to say that the country was out to see what the race. The boy who rode Pilgrim had nearly grown all quite strong, while Dick was about 10 years old for a midget that. When they came out to the track, the word traveler was so keen to go, and so powerful withal, that by merely fighting half restlessly the bit, he jerked Dick about the saddle as a cork in the billow. Master, said Dick as he rode up to where Major Robinson stood, I have heard one thing. Won't you do me a favor? What is it, Dick? Asked the Major, as he caught the strong horse by the bit to see what the boy wanted. I'm feared I can't hold down, said Dick. I'm so light. Won't you let me tie him in the saddle? Major shook his head. No, no, Dick, he said. That would be cruel and treating you unfairly. The horse might run away or fall, and I'd rather lose the race than see you hurt. Do the best you can as it is. And I'd rather die than lose the race, master, said Dick determinedly. Tie me in, and if anything happens, I won't blame you. The Major reluctantly yielded to the boy's entreaties. Strong girth was passed over Dick's thighs as he was in the saddle and tightly buckled around the horse. Word was soon given, and they were away. The horses paced like a team, both riders holding them down for fear they would break. At the first mile, they had come thoroughly warmed to the work and were steady enough to be given their heads more freely. At the second mile, Dick led by a length, and the third he had given still swifter, and owing a break of the Pilgrim. He was a good 10 lengths ahead, and his horse moving like machinery. But there an unexpected happened. Dick was too light for the powerful animal.
Scarcely was he past the third mile and going at a terrific speed when Traveler, taking the bit in his teeth and having insufficient weight at the reins, pulled Dick, saddle and all, slightly forward, and then, to the horror of all, the saddle turned, and the boy and the saddle were soon dangling under the powerful horse's belly, while his flying feet appeared likely at any moment to end Dick's life at the race at the same time. And to a larger rider, tight as Dick was, such would have been the result. But why not with wiry little Dick? His presence of mind did not forsake him. With both hands he grasped the single brand that ran around the horse's neck, dug his sharp heels into the traveler's flanks, and stuck there closer than a flying squirrel under an oak limb. And the crowd, when they saw the act, and the fact that the gallant horse never broke his gait, cheered itself hoarse. But in an instant it stopped. Traveler, riderless, had slackened his speed. Pilgrim came up and passed him, while Traveler, bewildered, mechanically followed several lengths behind. It was all up for the Major. But not so. Dick quietly waited for his peerless position till he turned into the stretch, and then the crowd went wild again, for Dick, reckless Dick, turned loose of his whip hand, gathered a firmer grip of his left, and swung out his keen rawhide and made Traveler think 100 hornets had settled on him. It was a horse race from there to the wire, but Traveler had sped and went under half length ahead. No wonder 100 men seized the bridle and cut Dick loose from the perilous position. No wonder the Major himself picked him up for joy, and while he declared $10,000 could not buy him, thenceforth he was free. Wow. That was a story and a half. And again, did have some less than politically correct language, but uh, that was crazy though. Would not have thought that being a historic rendition of how racing had started, but hey, I have not pre-read this book at all. I probably should pre-read, but I want to thank everyone for coming in, though. I usually only do the 2 hour reading nights. So. Let's see who's on right now. Does anyone have any raid suggestions? I'm open for it. That's my major coughing didn't start until over halfway through the reading, so that wasn't too bad. Hey, Juggies. Thanks for coming in. You coming with the raids or
Find me on your own. Ah, cool. That's how I lurk in a lot of places. Let's see. I don't have any rate suggestions because I said I usually only do the 2 hour reading streams. My gaming streams are a lot longer, but I don't schedule them. Let's see what's going on in the world. Ouch. Uh, okay. Lots of people playing Cult of the Lamb right now. Man, how many people aren't playing Cult of the Lamb right now? That's crazy. Hey, Joji. Thanks for coming in. Always nice to see you names. Trying to see who to rate out to because I was finishing up stories and sunshine. Uh, so yeah, I think I read another one cleric before. Let's see that. How you doing, Joji? Yeah, a lot of people kind of fall in with raids. That's probably the easiest way to meet new people. Let's see. Oh, thank you. It's part of my, modern mage appeal. I've been thinking about trying to get one made. A friend's making me a chibi version of this too, so it'll be interesting when that happens. Let's see. Yeah, chibis and beans are always kind of cute. I've got, let's see, then we got my other version here. I've got one that it is a PNG. It, switch over, show that. Facing under. Uh, yeah, that cute little guy. Different outfit, but That's it. That one just got set up as a PNG when I was doing that kind of things. Yeah, the person who did both of those drawings is the same one who did my Live 2D model that I'm using now. Yeah, it's like if you go to on Twitter and just do the Story Wolf art tag, you'll see all the different stuff I have. No problem. Cooking's always important. But yeah, that's it. But yeah, thank you. This. Okay. I think I found someone great into. So let's see. What is he playing? That's weird. I don't recognize the game. Oh well. Thanks everyone for coming in. That's awesome to get raids, especially two of them. So let's see. We're going to raid out to another. Not so much a VTuber, but it's another one I've been trying to support and help him get followers and such. So, uh, don't think he's expecting anyone to come in, so that just makes it all the better. So, yeah, thanks everyone for coming in, and let's kind of pass the level on to the next one. Okay, so again, thank you all for coming in, and it's kind of been awesome having people show up. So, have a good night, and pass on some love to Vicious. So, good night, everyone.